which was it was in movement. I mean, it was between places, right? Yeah. I mean, it was literally when he was in Mexico and he had these conversations, and it was also, he was leaving something. I mean, he was leaving a world. He was leaving the nationalist, religious, Brahmin, yogic kind of world in which he was very active, right? I mean, he was very much a part of this Indian nationalist movement when he was young, being a leader of it. And I wonder whether that lived experience of his, of being between places, not being at home, not knowing when he's going to return home, informed the way that he learned, acquired Marxism, such that Marxism for him, the main element became this notion of not being national, not being a person who belongs to any particular place. There's something different then that colonial communists have to do that the European communists probably didn't have to do, which is they had to invent their indigenous communism.
I would say they had to reinterpret Marx for their condition. They had to take what was possible to understand from Marx for their country.
And this is the thing with M.N. Roy, that from the very beginning, I think from 1920, 1921, he defined himself as someone who was not going to be nationalist. This response to Lenin's theses, one of the main points is, no, I don't want to identify with the nationalist struggle. And this is the same thing that, the reason why he was isolated in Berlin from the other Indians, because he did not want to, hang around with Indians and let's have an Indian club and let's do Indian nationalist things. He wanted to be a true internationalist communist.
En écoutant Chris Manjapra, je réalise à quel point la position de M.N. Roy était alors originale. Inventant le tiers-mondisme avant l'heure, tout en rejetant aussi bien le dogme communiste que l'élan nationaliste.
Why was he attracted to the Capio is the question. The reason, I think, is because people who are marginalized are attracted to other people who have similar experience. And this is exactly where M.N. Roy, exactly in this kind of middle world, is where M.N. Roy felt most comfortable. That's why so many of the interventions that he makes in Marxism actually in some ways reflect changes that were taking place in Western Marxism, with the Frankfurt School, for example. Yeah. These German Jews who were attracted to Marxism were always faced with the problem of, same problem that M.N. Roy, in fact, was faced with. How do you enter a tradition but somehow question the domination and the mainstream power? Many times, in almost every one of his books, he's making an intervention in Marxism and saying, I will not allow you to make Marxism this Eurocentric, almost racist ideology. But then when he moved to jail, his problematic changed. Yeah. The first things would be, for example, the feminist writings of M.N. Roy, which he wrote in jail and were published afterwards, writing about the Indian woman and saying basically Indian women have their own sexual economy. They have their own being, second, writing about prisoners, right, and saying prisoners are created by society. They are not pariah of society. They are a sign that there is something ill in the society itself. He focused actually on sexual prisoners, which I think has a lot to do with his Berlin world, part of the sexual freedom movement in Berlin at the time. It was actually very important for him to say, all of the taboos that are in the society having to do with homosexuality, having to do with, he named many things that even for us today we would say, well, incest, or he talked about women who happen to kill husbands because of this very patriarchal society that they live in. In each of these cases he said, first of all, I stand on the side of the criminal, and the reason why these things happen, for example, violence or women killing their husbands, so forth, is not about the prisoner, but it's about the problem of society itself. The impulse of his thought seems to me to be very Marxian humanist, from the time that he returns to India onwards, and then the Marxian gets less and less and the humanist gets more and more, but this complex of Marxian humanism is very Berlin, German, Berlin Marxist. But on the other side, I think that it's not only that the Berlin world was lost, but I sense that maybe time and time again in Roy's life, worlds had been lost.
Yeah.
So he'd gone through, this Indian phase in which he was a part of the Anushilan Samiti, and this was lost. That whole kind of Indian revolutionary moment gone, and then there was the Mexican phase gone. Then there was the Berlin phase gone. Then there was the Comintern phase that disappeared, and then there was the prison phase. Which also was its own contained thing in which he actually produced and created something new, and then that was over. And I just wonder, this might be what happens when a person has so many worlds that kind of die.
M.N. Roy sait ce qu'il risque. Et pourtant, en dépit des tentatives de Brandler et Thalheimer de le retenir, il quitte Berlin pour Istanbul, d'où il rejoint Bagdad, puis Karachi par la route, et enfin Bombay, où il arrive en décembre 1930, après un exil de 15 années. Les Britanniques ne tardent pas à le repérer et l'arrêtent. Au tribunal de Kanpur, il est condamné à 12 ans d'emprisonnement pour conspiration communiste contre l'Empire. Calcutta, Moscou, Tachkent, Pékin, quelques-uns des mondes perdus de M.N. Roy s'affichent sur le petit écran scintillant, tandis que mon avion, bientôt, atterrira à l'aéroport international Indira Gandhi de Delhi, l'Inde, où débute et s'achève l'histoire d'un homme libre, Manabendranath Roy. Je ne suis pas particulièrement physionomiste, reconnaîtrai-je Hari Vasudevan, cet historien indien qui, le premier, m'avait parlé de M.N. Roy et montré sa photographie. Il m'a fixé rendez-vous à l'Indian International Center, sorte de club endormi aux activités indécises, décor idéal d'un roman d'espionnage. Pourrait-il s'agir de ce monsieur en veste grise ? Non, son visage ne me dit rien. Mais voici que Harry débarque en trombe, je le reconnais bien sûr sans peine, d'autant qu'il me gratifie d'un « Bonjour Volodia » tonitruant et en russe, avant de nous entraîner énergiquement vers la salle à manger. Je suis plutôt satisfait d'évoquer M.N. Roy dans un lieu au maintien si anglais, pardon madame, qu'il n'aurait à coup sûr pas désavoué, je vous en prie monsieur, avec son éternelle allure de gentleman que n'érodèrent ni la bohème cosmopolite de Mexico, ni les restrictions bolcheviques, ni la modestie de son train de vie en Inde après sa sortie de prison.
The trouble with Roy, in this sense, I think he's in many ways just an individualist, and very, very brilliant individualist. But nevertheless, you can see that even towards the end of his career, even though he associated with the Congress and had the union movements and various other such connections, finally, none of them wanted to put him on their emblem. It was, and to be frank with you, this is something which I always think about the way Lenin chose him, as opposed to Viren and others. I sometimes wondered whether Lenin's choice was not deliberate, in the sense that because he was a loner, because actually he did not have those connections, Lenin actually considered he would have been more usable, manipulable. I think if you were standing, as I frequently say, at the beginning of the 1920s, and you were asking for Indians who are known through the world, you would probably have, alongside Mahatma Gandhi, have put M.N. Roy. Because people like Nehru were totally unknown, okay? And already by the mid to late 20s, Roy was known on 3 continents.
Je reviens le lendemain à l'Indian International Center pour discuter cette fois avec le docteur Sareen, historien des mouvements révolutionnaires indiens à l'étranger.
He has never been mentioned in the history books as other people, you see. But he was definitely, his contribution was not less than that of many other Indian revolutionaries. No, that I admit. The difficulty was that he could not stick to one particular ideology.
No.
That was his failure.
You think it's a failure?
Yes, it was a failure. You see, you have to, if you are a communist, then you have to remain a communist. You can't just, change your side. If you are condemning the Congress, how can you join the Congress? You see? You have to admire the courage of the man. You see,
Yes.
After all, he is not an ordinary personality. He's quite a brain behind the whole thing. And having, succeeded with the Communist International was not an easy job. Where the other Indian revolutionaries, more than 21, but ousted from Russia, he succeeded. You see, at least Roy was fortunate to come back.
Exactly.
You see, while Viren Chattopadhyay had to die on the purge, you see.
Yeah, he was very lucky to escape to Berlin and not to come back to Russia, because I'm afraid
You see.
otherwise.
Abani Mukherjee also died, and these 2 people, you see, became the victims of the purge, you see. Well, this man was, he could read the situation very well, most probably. He was more of an intellectual.
Yes,
so,
yes. Virendranath Chattopadhyay, l'un des leaders des Indiens de Berlin, Abani Mukherjee, le compagnon de lutte de Tachkent et Moscou, broyé par la machine répressive stalinienne, tandis que M.N. Roy sera, lui, enfermé en Inde. Parmi ces écrits de prison, il y en a un auquel je songe alors que je visite le splendide tombeau d'Humayun, 2e empereur de la dynastie moghole. Dans ce petit essai, le rôle historique de l'islam, M.N. Roy expose l'importance civilisatrice des invasions musulmanes grâce à ses savants et philosophes, précurseurs d'une pensée sceptique, matérialiste, voire rationaliste, qui confère à l'islam son véritable rôle historique selon Roy, sapait les bases de toute religion. Armé de son paradoxe hérétique, il renvoie hindous et musulmans indiens de son temps dos à dos, les incitant à tirer de l'islam la leçon humaniste de ses lumières, plutôt que son recul dogmatique et obscurantiste. C'est peu de dire que Roy ne sera guère écouté. L'Inde moderne naîtra dans le sang des massacres intercommunautaires entre hindous et musulmans, qui en 1947 feront plus de 250 000 morts et pousseront près de 10 millions de personnes à l'exode, d'un côté à l'autre, de la frontière pakistanaise nouvellement créée. Conflits religieux qui, jusqu'à aujourd'hui, menacent la stabilité du pays, aussi bien à l'intérieur, par les provocations régulières des extrémistes des 2 bords, qu'à l'extérieur. Les tensions avec le Pakistan ont déjà fourni prétexte à 3 guerres, en 1949, 1965 et 1971. Pour l'instant, l'Inde est en paix et célèbre d'ici quelques jours le Republic Day, commémorant la proclamation de la République indienne, le 26 janvier 1950. Et c'est un autre anniversaire qui me fait quitter Delhi et rejoindre, après une nuit de train, la ville de Dehradun, où le 25 janvier 1954 mourait M.N. Roy, il y a exactement 50 ans. J'espérais un rassemblement, une commémoration quelconque, en vain. J'interroge l'employé de l'office de tourisme de Dehradun, qui n'a évidemment jamais entendu parler d'aucun M.N. Roy, et me prend pour un illuminé. Dans le grand jardin public du centre-ville trône l'inévitable statue du père de la nation, et, à quelques allées de celle-ci, se dresse celle d'un autre opposant politique de M.N. Roy, Subhash Chandra Bose, dirigeant du Parti du Congrès, qui, s'il s'opposa aussi à Gandhi sur la non-violence, prit une position radicalement opposée à celle de Roy au moment de la Seconde Guerre mondiale, en créant une armée de libération indienne pour laquelle il obtint le soutien du Japon, de l'Allemagne nazie et des fascistes italiens. En revanche, ni guirlande d'œillets orange, ni statue poupine pour M.N. Roy. L'ermite de Dehradun, ici, n'existe plus pour personne. Je finis par trouver son adresse, sur une voie excentrée, Mohini Road, puis sa maison, au numéro 13, qui se dresse au fond d'un jardin. C'est là qu'il emménagea en 1938, avec Hélène Gottschalk, devenue Hélène Roy, et qu'il vivra jusqu'à la fin de sa vie. L'actuel occupant de la maison m'accueille avec chaleur. Il se présente, S.N. Puri. Je lui demande s'il connaît l'histoire de M.N. Roy. Il sourit et m'entraîne vers la terrasse de cette maison blanche, que je reconnais avec émotion, des photos que j'en ai vues, seule habitation vraiment identifiée d'une vie vagabonde. En dépit de ses 98 ans, la fougue roïste de S.N. Puri est restée aussi vigoureuse que lors de leur première rencontre, en 1936.
I'm, don't think I'm presumptuous, but I'm the only living person in the whole world or in India who was one of those who received Roy when he was released from Dehradun jail on 20th of November 1936. I'm the only living person who came into contact with him on that day personally. Before that, I had been of some use to him indirectly because I did not even know that I was functioning for him. That was how the secret organization, those function. He used to write some letters, smuggle them out of jail, and I was well connected in Dehradun. He came here actually in the month of May 1938 for 6 weeks rest. Then he stayed down, he liked the place, it was a calm, quiet place. He was editing his paper from here. All his political, social, cultural, all his activities were performed from this place. Previously, he came and joined the Congress. Then he started his League of Radical Democrats. I was there, I was one of the founder members along with him. Then I was the first secretary of the Indian Renaissance Institute with Ellen Roy. We were the joint secretaries. There was Indian Federation of Labour. I was one of the members, the Radical Democratic Party and all that. So whatever Roy did, I was connected with him. The more I came into contact with him, the more I was impressed by his ideas and his devotion to truth and integrity and morality in public life. And on this day, 50 years ago, although I was not in Dehradun, but I came for his funeral. So I received a telegram that Roy was critically ill. I came here. And on this day, when I reached Hardwar, I already read that he had expired the previous night. On the very first meeting with Lenin, he differed with him on the decolonization. If I should say, that was Roy. He differed with Stalin. You know his last words, letter to Stalin? You know them?
No, tell me.
He had said, while parting with Stalin, he said, if honesty, integrity, and loyalty are no more Bolshevik virtues, then I'm afraid I have to part company with you.
Although he remained quite faithful to Stalin as a person, I remember that there was a photo of the 50s here where he's standing, there is a photo of Lenin and Stalin.
Roy, that was Roy's character. He was very objective. He was against Gandhism, but he was not against Gandhi. He would always recognize the worth of an individual sitting here in the veranda. He was saying that India cannot have freedom unless, people start discarding Gandhism. And he was talking about Gandhiism. And we as youngsters thought that he was talking against Gandhi. So I just casually said in a very thoughtless manner, so why not liquidate Gandhi? And he almost jumped on me like a tiger. And he says, I don't want to kick a dead body. Gandhiism will be finished before Gandhi dies. And when he was presiding over a meeting, probably somebody in Calcutta was addressing it. News came that Gandhi died. And Roy was the first. He stood up, he got the news. He stood up, gentlemen, a tragedy has happened. The greatest son of India has died. Gandhi died. The day he was shot, he died. They could not, with all the resources, he being the father of the nation, being bigger than Abraham Lincoln, he could not run his paper for 2 years. The people could not run his paper for 2 years. Now, this is in your hand, being published today. And it was started, Roy started this paper in 1937, 4th of April 1937. Who has forgotten him? Do you find me having forgotten him?
No, of course.
No. So if, people are like a sack of potatoes. The potatoes do not know what. No, but there are intellectuals. Why have you come to 13 Money Road? Have you forgotten it? You are not an Indian.
Yes.
You have not taken part in Russian Revolution.
No.
He has. But you have not forgotten him. You have come to 13 Money Road. Why? Because there was a man who was a revolutionary, who had a charismatic personality. He lived in 13 Money Road. And therefore you came to 13 Money Road. How you got that address, I do not know. We don't know. I don't even know your name at present.
Le petit-fils de S.N. Puri, jeune entrepreneur, nous a rejoints. Il voudrait faire de la maison, jadis siège du Renaissance Institute, l'Institut de la Renaissance, créé par M.N. Roy, une école d'informatique. Il tente de me convaincre qu'il s'intéresse à la philosophie de Roy, en ce qu'elle constitue un nouveau fascisme, où tout ne serait pas si mauvais qu'on le dit. Je suis abasourdi, tente en vain de démentir une assertion si contraire à ce que furent les engagements de M.N. Roy. Dans ses écrits de prison, il se méfiait déjà de la connivence entre idéologie fasciste et nationalisme spiritualiste hindou. Il écrivait « L'Allemagne de Hitler possède largement toutes les caractéristiques spirituelles possibles pour être sûre de trouver des sympathisants parmi les nationalistes indiens les plus orthodoxes. » Comme soudain me paraissent fragiles la petite maison blanche de Mohini Road, son jardin bien entretenu, et les souvenirs qui la hantent encore, mais pour combien de temps? Ceux de M.N. Roy et Hélène Gottschalk, infatigables militants humanistes, ceux des amis chers venus ici, comme Ruth Fischer, figure historique du communisme allemand, et qui pose sur la terrasse avec l'un des multiples chats de la maison. En route vers le Bengale et Calcutta, je m'arrête à Bénarès, la ville sacrée au bord du Gange. Le soir de mon arrivée, je m'y promène le long des Ghats, ces bordées de marches qui mènent jusqu'au fleuve. Je m'enfonce dans les ruelles, où je croise des cortèges funèbres empressés, qui transportent les dépouilles emmaillotées de couleurs vives vers les bûchers de crémation. Sur Dasasvameda Road, c'est une procession plus frénétique encore. Des chars décorés, suivis de jeunes hommes dansant, brusques et graciles. Je ne sais où m'abriter de toute cette ferveur, qui m'effraie un peu, et j'atterris dans un restaurant à touristes, perché sur le toit d'une maison le long du Gange. Comme un talisman secret, pour traverser les foules exaltées, me reviennent les formules brutales de M.N. Roy à l'égard de l'hindouisme, qualifié d'idéologie de l'esclavage social, dont le soi-disant héritage spirituel a conduit à un asservissement politique de près de 1000 ans, à l'arriération économique, à l'inertie intellectuelle et à la déchéance culturelle. Le peuple ignorant et opprimé est le produit d'une civilisation décadente, attendant un enterrement trop longtemps différé. Roy poursuit. Il faudrait à ce pays un Kemal Pacha pour couper ces touffes ridicules au sommet des crânes, pour condamner le port de la moustache aussi lourdement que l'homicide, pour interdire l'insupportable psalmodie d'une langue que personne ne comprend. Mais qui en Inde était prêt à l'entendre? Aujourd'hui encore, ce qui me frappe, et surtout ici à Bénarès, c'est le sentiment d'absence d'histoire, le rite qui gagne tout ce qui l'environne, les corps, les gestes, les attitudes, la façon de se vêtir. De sa jeunesse de conspirateur nationaliste, il avait gardé ce goût de la solitude et du complot qui lui faisait choisir les lieux de crémation pour ses longues promenades méditatives comme pour les rendez-vous secrets de ces groupes d'insurgés. Révolutionnaire trop mondain à Mexico, bolchevique trop incontrôlable à Moscou, communiste mais anti-stalinien à Berlin, membre du Parti du Congrès mais antinationaliste et anti-Gandhi en Inde, les positions de M. N. Roy l'ont toujours condamné à l'isolement. Cette solitude, qui si elle peut être celle des poètes, des philosophes, des fous, n'était sans doute pas compatible avec l'ample mouvement politique, démocratique et radical, que M. N. Roy avait le projet de fonder à sa sortie de prison en 1936. Une réforme pacifique mais absolue de la société indienne que M. N. Roy, en dépit des strictes restrictions de lecture et d'écriture qui lui étaient imposées, avait conçue durant ses 6 années de détention, avec comme horizon la Renaissance et les Lumières européennes. Cet homme seul, dans un pays immense, à l'histoire et aux traditions millénaires, allait-il être entendu ?
There's a place called Coffee House, College Street. It's one of the greatest intellectual institutions in the city. Okay, it's absolutely filthy. It has a very nice food, if your stomach can bear it, and it has excellent coffee. Very cool. All right? But on the second floor, right next to it, is this extremely dingy room in which they have all the Royist books still available. It's open for about 2.5 hours a day. I mean, normally about 11, 12 o'clock is best.
J'arrive à l'heure indiquée par Hari Vasudevan, devant l'enseigne des Renaissance Publishers, autrefois siège du Renaissance Institute de M. N. Roy. Je trouve porte close. Je vais alors à l'Indian Coffee House, où Roy venait souvent en voisin, lui l'amateur de grands cafés, depuis le Sanborns de Mexico ou le Romanische Café de Berlin. Ici, il retrouvait collaborateurs et amis, dont Chamaren Roy, qui avait 20 ans en 1939 lorsqu'ils firent connaissance, à l'occasion d'une discussion sur la théorie de la relativité. Chamaren, s'étonnant qu'un leader politique s'intéresse à la physique, s'entendit répondre par Ellen Roy qu'Albert Einstein était un ami des années berlinoises. Le célèbre scientifique fit partie de ceux, avec Nehru et Henri Barbusse, qui protestèrent auprès des autorités britanniques contre les conditions de détention de Roy. C'est dans sa belle maison de Behala, un faubourg de Calcutta, que je rencontre Chamaren Roy. J'y suis accompagné par Jarna Bose. C'est chez Jarna, à Paris, que j'avais rencontré Hari Vasudevan et entendu parler pour la première fois de M. N. Roy.
When the war broke out, the stand that Roy took was against the internationalist sentiment. Even the communists, in the beginning, took a nationalist stand. M. N. Roy was forgotten from the day it was announced in the parliament that he is being given 13,000 rupees. This was disclosed intentionally by the British because they wanted help from M. N. Roy, but they wanted to keep him in discredit. He had no money. He had to run a party. He had to accept British grant. I know the whole details how that was arranged and that took place. And But all those who joined Roy were intellectually oriented much more than being politically oriented. Roy's biggest shock in life, politically, was the defeat in 1946 elections. None of the Royists won a seat in the Lok Sabha election. That broke him down completely. I have not met a man who was so honest and who was so liberal and who was so humanistic. I will tell you a story. My wife used to go and talk with Roy. And one day Roy asked her, "Can you sing, Chaya?" Chaya said, "Yes, I can sing." He said, "Why don't you sing?" My brother, who was then tuning the radio, that day Subhash Bose was speaking from Singapore. And he was coming to Roy and said, "Subhash Bose is speaking from Singapore." And Roy said, "You get out." My wife sang to him for about half an hour. Then my brother came and told him, "You missed him, missed the speech." He said, "Thank God." In 1945, Chaya has become sickly, slim and all that. The doctor has asked me to give her port wine. I can't get port wine now. 6 months later, I had visited Roy in Dehradun. And then we were waiting at the door, and he was looking at inside the door. I did not. I said, "Where is Ellen?" He said, "She's coming, she's coming." And she came, and Roy said, "Have you brought?" He said, "Yes." There were 2 bottles of port wine. Nobody else would do it. Nobody else would do it. This is a kind of autobiography of mine. Here I have written, if you have time, I will read for 5 minutes. I can also give you. I think I have a photograph of Charlie Phillips here. This one is Charlie Phillips.
Et voilà de nouveau la fameuse photo.
As you know, we have
Ce que je découvre pour la première fois en revanche, c'est cette version de l'évasion de Moscou que Chamaren Roy tient de la sœur de Louise Geisler.
I said, "Who gave him permission to leave Moscow? Did Bukharin give him the permission?" That was the common story. She said, "Nobody gave him the permission. I was in charge of the German Legion in the Communist International headquarters. And every German communist used to sleep with me. So I could control the whole legion. So I told the pilot who used to fly, and we didn't need any permission to fly from Moscow to Berlin. So I, the pilot, Roy, and my sister, Lou, we flew to Berlin.
À la grande foire du livre de Calcutta, je n'ose y croire, mais je tombe sur un stand des Renaissance Publishers avec un étal fantastique. À côté d'ouvrages plutôt récents, comme les études de Chamaren Roy ou la dernière biographie de M.N. Roy en date par Shibnarayan Ray, sont proposés à la vente des exemplaires de The Marxian Way, la voie marxienne, trimestriel royiste, publié entre 1945 et 1949, ou bien un tract du Parti démocratique radical pour les élections de 1946. J'achète une cargaison de livres poussiéreux dans lesquels je me plonge aussitôt. Et le projet politique conçu par M.N. Roy m'apparaît dans toute sa démesure. Dans un pays où les classes sociales semblent figées à jamais, rendues immuables par un système de caste ancestral, il imagine une démocratie participative totale, animée par des comités populaires de citoyens élus dans chaque localité. Organes de discussion et de pouvoir, ces comités sont aussi conçus comme des lieux d'éducation politique du citoyen, invités à occuper toutes les fonctions de décision, sans considération de classe, de caste ou de religion. Persuadé que la fin de la guerre serait rapidement suivie de l'indépendance indienne, il rédige en 1944 un projet de constitution pour l'Inde et travaille à un plan de développement économique, le People's Plan, d'inspiration socialiste. Pour mettre en œuvre ces réformes, il quitte l'aile gauche du Parti du Congrès et fonde le Parti démocratique radical. Mais l'échec d'héroïste aux élections générales de 1946 et la brutalité du processus d'indépendance en 1947 mettent fin aux espoirs d'un renversement institutionnel de l'ordre établi. Déçu par l'action politique, M.N. Roy dissout son parti en 1948 et entame son dernier combat, intellectuel et philosophique. Il crée le mouvement radical humaniste, plaçant l'éducation et la liberté de l'individu comme préalable et centre de tout projet d'émancipation sociale.
I used to attend all the underground meetings also. But I thought that whatever they do, they won't be able to break this system because the system is so corrupted and the system